and welcome. My name is Karen Bain. I serve as the Associate Dean for Academic Innovation in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. And on behalf of our college and our co-sponsors, I am really delighted to welcome our speaker, C.S. Liu, here tonight, who will be presenting on Can Sustainable Agriculture Feed the World? What is the role of innovation and thinking outside the box? Before I introduce CS, I do want to mention, first we have food out the top of the stairs, but also if you're here for extra credit, you can scan your card once the lecture has finished, again at the top of the stairs. Our speaker, C.S. Liu, is a graduate of Iowa State University in Agronomy and Integrated Pest Management, and he has over 45 years of global experience in the agricultural inputs industry. He is Managing Director of Singapore-based Pacific Agriscience, and he is active in global mergers and acquisitions. He has served in many prestigious positions. Currently, this includes Council Member of the World Agricultural Forum, and he is a member of the Advisory Board of Agribusiness Global, which is a world-renowned agricultural inputs magazine based in Ohio in the US. He is a highly sought-after speaker for his global expertise on agriculture, which is why we're especially delighted to have him. Before I hand it over to CS, I would like to welcome Roger Underwood to come to the stage, who would like to say a few words about his dear friend and colleague, C.S. Liu. So Roger is a lifelong entrepreneur, investor, and philanthropist. Roger is a native of Atlanta, Iowa, and a 1980 ag business alum of Iowa State. Roger and his high school classmate, Jeff Becker, co-founded Becker Underwood in Ames in 1982 to develop a special colorant to mark herbicide application, resulting in more efficient farming practices. Roger is currently an investor and chair of Pivot Bio, a Berkeley, California ag biotech company. And he also serves as a board member of Kent Corporation of Muscatine, Iowa. Roger was recently inducted into the Iowa Business Hall of Fame. And Roger and CS are not only peers in the ag industries, but are longtime friends from their time on campus. So please welcome Roger as he introduces CS.
Thank you, Dr. Bain. I didn't need all of that. But I wanted to just make sure that you students understand what a great speaker you've got tonight in C.S. Liu. Last week he was probably in Brazil, next week it'll be Germany, India after that, China, who knows. This guy is special. He's an Iowa State graduate. But like a lot of you, I recognize are freshmen here and younger Iowa State students. You know, you come to Iowa State and you see old people like CS and I up here and you hear what we've done in our career and you say, well, I never can do that. And I want you to know that you can do that. CS and I were both from pretty average backgrounds. CS grew up in Malaysia, and what he's not going to tell you is in August of 1976, he was getting ready, packing his bags to come to Iowa State. His father passed away. 2 days later, he buried him, and he went right from the funeral with his bags and got on an airplane and flew to Ames, Iowa, where he'd never been, and became a freshman at Iowa State. So I want you to know the kind of character this guy has, that he doesn't let anything get in his way. And my challenge to you as Iowa State students is don't let anything get in your way in your career, and you can do as well as CS or I have ever done in our career. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you. Thank you, Carmen, and thank you, Roger, for the introduction. So, as Carmen pointed out, the subject that I want to cover tonight is Can Sustainable Agriculture Feed the World? The role of innovation and thinking outside the box. Now, forget about Iowa, forget about the US, we don't have food security issue in this country. Think of the rest of the world. Think of the world in totality. How many of you here think that we have a food security issue today, as well as 2050, when it's known to have 9.5 or 10 billion people? Right now, it's just over 7 billion. So how many of you think that we have a food security problem today? And show of hands, right? Okay. You'll be surprised, right? By the end of tonight's presentation here, I hope you'll be thoroughly confused, right? And that's my objective, to get you confused, because when you are confused, you are going to go out there to seek the truth, to seek knowledge. That's what I'm hoping to achieve, right? So I'm not here to really lecture you on what is right, what is wrong, what is enough, what is not enough in terms of food, whether we are all practicing sustainable, regenerative agriculture or not. I want you to make your own judgment. But here tonight, I'm just going to bring you some facts and figures, and hopefully you will go out and dig up more, right? And make up your mind as to where the world is going in terms of food production, right? Yeah, just to let you see, this is the guy up there. Right? So very quickly, 45 years of global experience in agricultural sciences. So I started out working 1 year in Malaysia for Ciba-Geigy, which today is called Syngenta. And then I moved to Singapore in 1980. So I've been in Singapore for almost 45 years. So I'm already a citizen of Singapore, right? I have served in different boards. One of them is New Farm, an Australian company. They have several subsidiaries, and I was board members of a couple of those subsidiaries. And also Thailand-based Sotus International, which is a very successful agrochemical, ag input supplier in Thailand. And Roger actually went there with me and met the board of directors, because I wanted Roger to talk to them about his success, right? How he started his company in 1982 and became a very successful company. In the end, about, 14 years ago, Becker Underwood, the company founded by Roger and Jeff Becker, both graduates of ISU. It was sold to BASF for $1.02 billion, a roaring success story, right? So you can Google, you can find out Becker Underwood sold to BASF, right, of Germany. You can get the full story. And also I was a board member of McMahon Organics, an Indian listed agrochemical producer in India. So I was a board member for several years, right? So Carmen already mentioned, I'm now a council member of the World Agricultural Forum. You heard of the World Economic Forum, right? Where all the big guys from all over the world, the Bill Gates of this world, will congregate in Davos in Switzerland every year for this World Economic Forum. So we now have a World Agricultural Forum, right, established in Amsterdam, and I was roped in as a council member. And hopefully, I saw a picture of President Winterstein as a board member. I don't know whether she has accepted the nomination to be a board member. I hope she does. So if that's the case, we have two of us from Iowa State in the World Economic Forum, right? So before I talk about whether we have looming food crisis, whether we are able to feed the world with sustainable agriculture, I want to show you what is the situation right now, right, in terms of farming, in terms of food production. So here I have two columns, right? Farming in the developed world, farming in the developing world. So under the developed world, I gave some examples. North and Latin America. Latin America is not really considered developed countries, but in terms of agriculture, I would classify that as being equivalent to North America, which is Canada and the US, right? Because they have very sophisticated, large farming operations in Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and I understand there's also going to be a ISU study tour headed to Argentina, right? So on the other side of the scale, you have farming in the developing world. Here, I want to say it will include the Indian subcontinent, Central America, and most countries in Africa, right? So I just want to contrast these two groups of farmers because, as you know, if all pigs are not equal, neither are farmers, right? Farmers in the developing world and farmers in the developed world are very different. They have different needs, so therefore, that's why I put this down here. Yields are higher in the developed world, yields are low, mechanized in the developed world, highly dependent on labor in the developing side of the scale. Many mid-sized to large farms in the developed world, and then small to mid-size on the other side, and high inputs, agricultural inputs, fertilizers, good seed varieties are all being used in the developed world, whereas the developing world will have low inputs. Farming is industrialized as opposed to subsistence and semi-professional farming. Farming with a business focus. Now, this is where I keep telling wherever I go and give a talk, you know, like in India about a month, 3-4 weeks ago, when we had the World Agriculture Forum. Our first meeting was in Mumbai, in India, and I mentioned that India used to be a ship-to-mouth country. What does that mean? Food was actually donated to India back in the 50s, 60s, right? Today, India is already an export powerhouse in terms of food, in terms of agriculture. Everybody thinks India is a poor country. How can India be exporting food? They export actually $50 billion of food every year, of which $11 billion are rice. So India is the biggest exporter of rice. So you can imagine, in a span of 30, 40 years, from ship to mouth to an export powerhouse. And I was then telling the audience, a packed auditorium like this, I was saying, you could actually do $100 billion, $200 billion worth of exports if you do some changes to your cultural practices, which I'm going to detail later, right? So one thing was to focus on growing crops to make money, not growing crops just to feed the local population, right? You have to have that focus. So a lot of developing countries, that's not the case at the moment. They just grow food so that they have enough to feed the family and maybe the local communities. That's a wrong focus. In fact, recently I met the ambassador to Singapore from Timor-Leste, which is an island country in Southeast Asia. I was telling him, I said, why is it that you keep importing food? You have good land, you have good soils, you have rain, why not grow more? But I said, you don't grow what the others are growing. There's no point for you to grow rice, right? Because India is already so efficient in producing rice and they're exporting $11 billion. I said you should grow food to look at exporting, crops that are in demand, food that is in demand overseas. And then his remark to me was, CS, we haven't even got enough grown to eat. I said, well, that's exactly the wrong focus, right? When you grow something that you can export, you can earn foreign exchange, you can buy all the staple food that you want from other countries, right? That can produce much better than you can, right? Corn coming from the US, soybeans coming from the US, they all produced very, very efficiently at low unit cost. So why do you want to grow corn and why do you want to grow soybeans? Why do you want to grow rice, right? So you see the thinking is all wrong. You got to think of growing something of value that you can exchange for something of lower value, right? So that's the message that I'm trying to drum in. Okay, in the developed world, co-ops are very strong. These are farmer co-ops. By the way, I work with the largest farmer cooperative in France, right? 8 years ago, I got them to acquire a company in Brazil called CCAB. Both are farmer cooperatives. In Vivo in France is the largest farmer cooperative in France. 3 out of 4 French farmers belong to the In Vivo group. So why are co-ops being strong important? Because that allows farmers to buy better when they go out and buy seeds, fertilizers, pesticides. As a group, you definitely can buy a lot better, right? When you sell your grains, you know, the farmers in the co-op to the ABCDs, you know, Archer Daniels Midland, Bunge, Cargill, and Dreyfus, which control 80% of the world's food grain movement and trading, right? When you sell your grain to them, you have bargaining power as a group, right? As opposed to being an individual farmer, right? And then mostly food exporters in the developed world, while in the developing world, it's mainly food importers. And farmers benefit from ag tech. Ag tech would be your AI, your blockchain, your digital farming, your precision farming, right? So only the big farms in the US, in North America, and developed countries can benefit from that. In the developing world, farmers have no need and no desire to adopt any of this. They need a different set of technologies, which I can, of course, show you in a subsequent slide. And in the developed world, of course, very good post-harvest handling, and while on the other side is poor infrastructure. Okay, so these are just pictures to show you what I mean. On the left-hand side, you can see cotton in Brazil, right? Just like in Georgia, right? Where I had one summer of internship in a cotton farm, right? Back in 1978. In 1977, I was in York, Nebraska, in corn farms and soybean farms doing field trials, right? And then the second summer of internship, I did it in Tifton, Georgia, which was a peanut and cotton farming area. So on the other side of the scale, you can see Nigerian cotton farmers picking by hand, right? And then here, more closer to Asia, or in Asia itself, on the left, you can see rice transplanting in Japan, right? And rice harvesting. Simple mechanization, right? And not back-breaking work that Indian subcontinent farmers have to endure, right? Back bending all day long and even harvesting by hand, right? So you can see, the contrast there, right? All right, so this 2 pie charts here kind of summarizes the situation that I've been trying to illustrate to you, right? So altogether around the world, there are 550 million farms, right? When they surveyed 161 countries. Of course, there are more countries than 161, but right, so you can see in most of the farms are actually located in India and China. I'm talking about numbers of farms, right? Not total farming area. Where is the United States? It's at the 4%, right? Right on top, 4% high-income countries. The pie chart on the left is a classification of where the farms are, the 570 million farms. The classification is based on the geography, right? India has 24% of the total of 570 million farms, China 35 million. So the rest of Asia, can you see right on the top there, 9% East Asia and the Pacific. So that's another 14% that excludes China. And then you have India and South Asia, which is also the countries surrounding India. So you can see all those numbers I have mentioned combined takes up about 80% of the world's farms, right? So most of farms are located in Asia, which has very high population density, right? India and China both have now 1.4 billion people, right? So you can see that. On the right, we classified it by income group, right? You can roughly see that half of the world's 570 million farms are in richer countries and half are in poorer countries, right? So the 36% lower middle income countries, that would include India. And then the 47% upper middle income countries would include China. So again, the split is very much like the pie chart on the left, right? India and China are the biggest countries in terms of numbers of farms. So why do I want to tell you all this? It's because the question here is, can we feed the world with sustainable farming? So we have to understand that there are different types of farms, right, in the world. So they will require different technologies. They will require different set of skills, right? So it's important now to say we can divide the world agriculture into two distinct blocks, right? The developed countries and the less developed countries, or the developing countries. I already mentioned, right? Another thing is that 80% of the food grain trading and logistics are controlled by the big four, ABCD, Archer, Daniels, Midland, Bunge, Cargill, Dreyfus. A, B, C are all located in the US. D is, I think, Dutch, so it's located in Holland, right? So again, it's good to put this in perspective, because later I'm going to ask a question, right? Why do you see so many consumers around the world, including in the US, moaning about food price inflation? And yet, at the beginning of this year, for 3 or 4 months, all over Europe, farmers were out on the streets with their tractors, with their trucks, protesting that they're not making money, right? And yet consumers, on the other hand, are saying we are having to pay more and more for food. So what is happening here, right? The guys who are producing the food are not making money. The guys who are paying for food are saying we're going to pay more and more. So think about it. Who's making all the money, right? Now, the impact of war, sanctions, geopolitical rivalries, climate change. So this is the part where, sitting here as a farmer in Iowa, I really have no clue as to what is happening. Why one day I'm selling my corn and soybeans very well, good demand from China, from wherever. Next day, we're not exporting to China anymore because of geopolitical rivalries between the US and China, right? China is retaliating against US, imposing high tariffs, high import taxes on goods coming from China into the US. So China retaliates by importing less corn and soybeans, and pork and whatnot from the US, right? As I say, sitting here as a farmer, what is going on? Why all of a sudden I didn't do anything wrong? I didn't, cause anybody to not wanting to do business with us, and yet my corn is now facing low prices because China is not buying. China has gone to Brazil, to Argentina, to Paraguay to import more of those grain. So then all of a sudden you have Ukraine war, right? Ukraine and Russia are major exporters of commodities, agriculture related, right? Russia is a major exporter of fertilizers. In fact, in Brazil, 35% of the fertilizers would come from Russia, right? And then Ukraine is a major exporter of food grain like wheat and also sunflower. So all of a sudden prices shot up, right? And then you may think, okay, the farmers should be doing very well, right? No, because freight rates have gone way up, right? And Ukraine couldn't even export whatever they used to export because the Russians were blocking the ports. And therefore, all the food grain produced in Ukraine had to move somewhere. So it moved across the border to Poland. And the Polish farmers are all up in arms, right? We are already suffering. We are paying for more for power, for diesel, for electricity, for fertilizers, for whatever inputs. And here, all this cheap grain coming over from Ukraine. So you can see, right? Sitting there as a Polish farmer, again, what did he do wrong? What did she do wrong, right? So all these are, sanctions, due to sanctions, right, against Russia. A lot of cheap energy used to flow to NATO countries, especially Germany, right? With the war, with the sanctions against Russia, of course, price of oil, price of energy shot up, right? So again, not your doing, nothing to do with all these farmers sitting there in Poland, in Iowa, in anywhere, right? All of a sudden, you have all these problems, right? Back in my days in Iowa State, 45 years ago, farmers only had to worry about climate, right? So you need to worry what is happening in the Chicago Board of Trade with beans, with pork belly, with corn, and all that. But today, it's not just watching what is happening in the Chicago Board of Trade. You have to think about all this climate change, geopolitical rivalries, war, sanctions, totally out of your control. Okay, so next point I want to make is overproduction is the real food crisis. I know many of you put up your hands, right, to say there's a food crisis, that there is a problem with food security, but I'm telling you that food is already overproduced, right? Now, there are lots of people talking about climate change having a negative impact on food production. The yield has gone down. I can also show you FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization figures to show that between 2000, the year 2000 and 2020, in the course of those 20 years, food production went up by 52% in total, globally, right? So where's the impact from climate change, right? You talk about more carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere, causing global warming. There is a silver lining, right, to this carbon problem, because the world is now greening up more. The green zone of the Earth is moving north and south, right, because of carbon dioxide, climate change, global warming, right? In Korea, the parts that they used to be able to grow pears and apples and nothing else, they are now able to grow mangoes, which is an exotic tropical fruit crop. Farmers are going to make more money being able to grow mangoes compared to apples and pears. So that's why I say there's a silver lining, right, to this so-called global warming. And also, don't forget that in greenhouses, they actually pump carbon dioxide into the greenhouses to boost yield. So carbon dioxide is not all bad. So this is something we need to keep in perspective, right? And global warming too, right? In fact, I read somewhere the yield of wheat in Australia over the last 20, 30 years had also gone up. And that is ascribed to global warming due to carbon dioxide, right? So not all bad. So we don't, vilify carbon dioxide that much, right? So yeah, going back to what I was trying to tell you, overproduction is the real food crisis. You know, just in the US, 30 million acres of corn is going into biofuel. So you can imagine, so if we have a real food crisis, how easy it is to solve it, right? Just divert it away from biofuel to food, right? I'm not saying everybody eats corn, but corn is also used as animal feed. You can also grow other crops instead of corn. Why are Iowa farmers keep growing corn? That's because you have so many biofuel operators demanding that corn, so that's why it is grown, right? So I'm sure Iowa used to be 20, 30, 40 years ago more diversified than just corn and soybeans, right? So today it's just focused on that to keep feeding the biofuel plants, all right? So I already talked about that. Farmers face food price inflation while consumers face food price inflation while farmers are not making money. So why? Go think about it, right? Okay, can we feed the world? 2050 population of 9 billion is a resounding yes. We can, in fact, already feed the 9, 10 billion people today, right, if we have to. Because of what I said, food is already overproduced. Okay, you may have food shortages from time to time in different parts of the world, but the world as a whole does not face any food security issues, right? So why do I say we can feed the people in 2050? Now, all the tools and technologies available today are not fully deployed, right? For the countries that I mentioned in the developing world, right? They are not even, a lot of them are not using basic post-harvest technologies like cold room, right? Now, you have harvested your grapes in India or wherever, the farmers just leave them in the open, right? They don't have cold storage facilities. So isn't that so basic that you have to keep fruit and vegetables in cold storage or cool rooms, right? Instead of leaving it in 40, 50 degrees centigrade heat, right? So why are they not doing that? It's because there's no return on investment. Somebody has to invest on the cold room, and that costs money and costs energy, right? So the return is not there because food prices are too low, right? So that is the problem. So we cannot even fully deploy all these different technologies that we have today. A lot are not being utilized. And I, aside from mergers and acquisitions, I also help startup companies, mostly in the bio sector, your biostimulants, biofertilizers, and biopesticides. I help these scientists who develop good technologies and products in the bio sector to find investors, to find global partners, right? So I'm helping them to do that. But having said that, a lot of these technologies come across my desk for evaluation, right? In terms of seeking investors. A lot of them don't cut it, right? So the value proposition is just too low, right? There will not be a return on investment for the farmers if they adopt that technology or product. So therefore, that's why I'm saying, because food prices are too low because of overproduction, and therefore many of the technologies that can boost yield further are not deployed. So if we were to have to increase yield, if we deploy a lot of these technologies, no problem increasing food production, right? Beyond the 52% in the 20 years. Maybe we can do another 52% in another 10 years if we deploy all these technologies. And many of these, as I said, negative ROI. Farmers are all entrepreneurs, right? If they can make money using your product, using your technologies, they will use it if they can make money. If they spend $1 and they can make $2, guaranteed that they will use it. But if not, no, they will not use it. We don't need more land for farming if we have to increase yield, right? So when I said earlier, the FAO figures showing that between year 2000 and 2020, in the 20 years, 52% increase in food production, only a small part of that was due to increase in cultivation in terms of using more land. A lot of that 52% increase was actually due to yield increase. How did you get yield increase, right? Technologies, right? Using the right inputs, using the right cultural practices, you can already increase yield substantially. And I also mentioned earlier, food for fuel can be diverted back to dinner plate, right? So a lot of food crops, biodiesel, bioethanol uses up tremendous amounts of food crops, right? So if we need to, we can divert it back, right? And if we need more land, land is available. In the case of Sub-Saharan Africa, 60% of the world's arable land that is not yet cultivated lies in Sub-Saharan Africa, right? They're not tapped, right? And Brazil has millions of acres of land not yet cultivated. And I'm not talking about going to the Amazon jungle to cut down forests to grow more crops. I'm talking about land that is not utilized, that are lying adjacent to existing farms, lots of that. And farmers are not utilizing it because there is not enough money to invest. And why is there not enough money to invest? Mainly because there's not enough ROI, return on investment, right? So why am I confident we can feed the additional 2 billion people coming to dinner with sustainable and regenerative agriculture, right? What is regenerative agriculture? I think most of you know what it is. Sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture simply means don't mess up the soil, right? So no-till farming is a regenerative agriculture practice, right? When you till, you plow the land, you will release a lot of carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. And you want to make sure your land has all the microorganisms that can help in nutrient absorption, right? A lot of fertilizers used by farmers, 50%, I understand, goes in the US, goes into the Gulf of Mexico in the end, right? That's because a lot of chemical fertilizers cannot be fully utilized by plants, right? Because of one reason or another, high pH, low pH, tied up in the soil. So you need biostimulants, which are either plant-based or microorganism-based, to solubilize some of these nutrients so that the plant roots can pick it up. And also today, you have a technology of using microorganisms, right, to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, right? Roger has also invested in a company called Pivot in the US that has a bacteria that can fix nitrogen for non-legume crops. I mean, back in the days when I was a student out in Nebraska and Georgia, helping to put out test plots, we had to plant our own soybeans. And I remember even those days, I was using rhizobium, right, to mix with the soybean seeds before planting. So rhizobium on a legume is well known to be able to fix nitrogen for the last tens of years. But to be able to fix nitrogen for a non-legume crop like corn, that is new, that is game-changing. And Roger has picked a winning horse, right? The company already crossed $100 million in sales last year, right, using this technology. So these are all groundbreaking technologies that can help the whole world in not only increase yield, but to attain sustainability and part of what we call regenerative agriculture processes, right? Okay, so I said we can feed the 2 billion more people because using water much more efficiently in farming through technologies and products with features of what I call low-tech, high-impact super returns. Okay, I'm going to show you an example. Rice farming. Rice is known to emit a tremendous amount of methane into the air. So methane, by the way, is 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide in causing global warming, right? In trapping heat. Methane is the biggest culprit, not carbon dioxide, right? So it happens that rice accounts for 8% of methane emissions in this world. That is because how did they grow rice, right? I think some of you might have seen it in Louisiana, but all over in Asia and many other countries producing rice is flood irrigation, right? Apparently, the idea behind growing it in paddy rice condition, meaning flood conditions, is to suppress weed. Now that is ridiculous, right? Using water to suppress weed. But in spite of all that, there's still a lot of weeds in rice fields that I've seen all over the world. So that doesn't, again, seem to jive. So instead of that, they should have done upland rice, right, farming. So don't flood it, even by alternating between flooding and drying can already save 10 to 20% of water, and 10 to 20% of water, and cuts down methane emission by half, right? So why are they not doing it? It's because cultural practices. For ages they've been growing rice in a flooded condition. So when I go to India, I will tell them, you guys have done very well. You export $11 billion worth of rice the biggest exporter of rice in the world, right? The second country is Thailand. They will always tell me, no, CS, you said we are a major exporter of rice. Actually, we are exporting to all over the world our precious water. Right. I said, well, but you didn't have to do that. You could plant, rice through drip irrigation and using plastic mulching. So it's a proven thing. People have done studies, and there are government subsidies in India for setting up drip irrigation. So whilst I said it's great to do away with flood irrigation and go into drip, but drip costs money. So farmers need to have some government subsidies, right? So here I am showing you in India, how you see sugarcane, look at bananas, all flooded, right? Crazy, using too much water. So instead, they should be using these plastic mulches, right? So they have holes punched in so their crops can come up. And also, it will suppress weeds as well, right? When you cover the ground, weeds are not going to grow, right? And can look at that, okra, look at that, sugarcane and bananas, ridiculous, right? So these are not the way to do it. They should be actually doing. Okay, I have 3 short videos here to show you what technologies are needed, but I don't know how to now click on the links, but I think you guys will get a copy of this. You can have a look. So it is quite similar to the first 2 pictures I showed Japan, using very simple agricultural equipment to harvest and to plant, right? So these are just, I don't have time also to show, so do click on those links, right? And then the second thing is reducing carbon footprint of conventional agriculture to mitigate climate change through impactful products and techniques. So we talk about methane, right? Emission from animals. In Denmark, government is buying up dairy farms to shut them down because they want to meet their net zero by 2050. They want to cut down on methane emissions, right? But bear in mind that methane emissions from animals can already be reduced up to 60% just simply through dieting and also dietary supplements. So a lot of research has gone into it, and some products are already out in the market that farmers can use to supplement and add it to the animal feed to reduce methane production. And then in the flooded rice situation, I already mentioned that. And more importantly, incentivize farmers to generate and trade carbon credits. I think all of you here have some idea of what carbon credits are, right? To offset. If you are a polluter, you emitted a lot of carbon dioxide, you need to be taxed. There's carbon tax. Even in Singapore, we are imposing carbon tax. And in Denmark, carbon tax on animals. Or each cow, farmers have to pay a certain amount of carbon tax. So, but on the other hand, if you do what I said, all these rice farms, instead of flooding it, now convert it to drip irrigation, you actually cut down on methane emissions, carbon dioxide emission. So why wouldn't you be earning carbon credits, right? So we need to look at this aspect more. At the moment, there are $2 billion traded on the carbon exchanges around the world of carbon credits, but only 1% of that $2 billion is rising from improved agricultural practices. But I think more can be done, right? So again, everything has a cost, right? So if you want to generate carbon credit by changing cultural practices, you need certifiers to come in and certify. That costs money and time. So that's why small farmers are not doing it. Now you have gene editing, new genomic techniques coming into the picture. In the past 30, 40 years, you have GMOs, right? Genetic modification. That's passé. Right? So we have moved along and we have gone into gene editing, which costs a lot less in terms of investment, right? To come up with a trait to GMO, it takes 12 to 15 years and $150 million of investment. For gene editing to come up with one new trait costs only $4 or $5 million and 4 or 5 years. So this is the way to go, right? With gene editing technologies. And then turning agricultural waste into useful products, allowing farmers to reap a second harvest. So this is also an important aspect. So I want to show you here oil palm trunks being converted to useful wood products and turning agricultural food waste to biofuels for sustainable aviation fuel. In Singapore, a major airport, Changi Airport, government is going to impose that all aircraft taking off, filling up with fuel in Singapore, needs to have a certain amount of the fuel be from SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. Okay, nice to say all that, but how do you get SAF, right? Through waste. But again, it costs more, right? So here's a picture showing the oil palm trunk. They last only 25 years, they yield for 25 years, and then they need to be felled, they need to be replanted. Okay, but up to now, no use for it, and we have now German technology that can be used to make them into useful wood products. The right-hand side, I'm showing you just small samples. They come up with big slabs that can make doors, windows, tables, chairs, right? So for the first time, we are able to use this technology from Germany to turn this oil palm trunks, right? Number 5, finally, IPM, the way to go. So I was telling you, I'm one of the first graduates in integrated pest management. It is the way to go because we need to reduce chemical pesticides and fertilizers. You heard of the European Farm to Fork platform, right? Where it calls for 50% reduction in chemical pesticide usage by 2030 and 20% reduction in chemical fertilizer usage by 2030. Now, this farm to fork strategy has been pushed back early this year. Remember, I said farmer protests, right? All over Europe, that we are not making money, and yet government is coming up with no more rules and restrictions on what we can use and what we cannot use, right? So that's been pushed back a little bit, but going forward, no doubt, we need to be more sustainable, right, in terms of agriculture. Adopt and increase usage of biosolutions, so instead of relying just on chemicals, we have now biopesticides, biofertilizers, right, and other biosolutions. Now, change some of the wasteful wrong cultural practices. I've already gone through that in India, right, what they need to do. And then AgTech, precision farming for large farms, which are already practiced anyway, right? And most of all, sustainable and regenerative agriculture must prevail, right? Then we also talk about alternative proteins. Remember, I come from Singapore, we don't have land. 10% of what we eat is grown locally, 90% imported, and government wants to increase that to 30% by 2030. No way we can do that. We don't have land. Singapore is a tiny little island, smaller than New York City, 6 million people. So we were thinking, government is thinking of vertical farm, indoor farm. So many indoor farms have already been shut down in the US in the last 2 years because energy prices went up. Right? How can you compete with people who are using sunlight, right? You are using energy to produce, light in indoor farming. So no way, your cost is too high. And then governments, research institutions, and corporates must step up efforts and work together. And most of all, farming has to be profitable for farmers. If farmers don't make money, we are all in trouble, right? So always keep in mind, farming has to be profitable. So finally, advice to students here, study global, think global, right? Don't think you are in Iowa, that's your world. You gotta think beyond Iowa, think outside the box, and also get outside the box, right? Don't just stick around. I was told today, people who graduate from Iowa State, and they tend to stay 50 miles radius out of Ames or whatever. A lot of them do that. I don't know, I was told that. So that is crazy, right? The world is your opportunity. Go out and do that. I'm also working with William Underwood, son of Roger Underwood, to see if his products that are meant for piggeries can go global. So we are working together to find some global markets for his operation. So think outside the US, right? Get your boots dirty. So you got to go to the farms like I did, right? I show you pictures of me going into farms in India a few weeks ago. So I learned a lot, by being out there. I see they're doing it all wrong, right? So unless you get out there, you're not going to know, right? So finally, also accept that food and agriculture policies will be impacted by multi-dimensional forces. Very frustrating, helpless at times. I already said, right? Climate change is only one thing that you cannot control, but actually you can mitigate. But when it comes to war, it comes to geopolitical rivalries and sanctions, these are all created by politicians, right? A poor farmer sitting here in Iowa, absolutely no control over that, right? Finally, participate in overseas study tour. So for those who are interested to go to Singapore, we have a ISU study abroad program that is going to go to Singapore in March next year. So I have flyers here for those who are interested and keen to learn how a small country like Singapore can address food and water security, and also a major economic powerhouse. So I don't know how many of you know about Singapore, where I come from, right? It's one of the richest countries in the world. No natural resources, no water, no land for agriculture, yet it is an economic powerhouse, right? So come and learn about how we address food security, how we import food from 170 over countries, and food prices are so stable. I was thinking, why are people in Europe or US, all this complaining about food price inflation? I say in Singapore, we don't grow any food, and yet we don't have food price inflation, right? So learn about how we tackle these sort of issues, right? Flyers are here, so let me know, right? So thank you for your attention, and thanks a lot for coming.
So we have 10 minutes for questions and answers, so please ask your questions, make comments.
Okay.
Have you ever traveled to Agritechnica in Germany?
Have I traveled to which part of Germany?
Agritechnica, the trade show?
Oh, the trade show, no, I haven't, yeah. Okay, have I traveled to Germany to attend a trade show called Agritechnica? What is that trade show about? Technologies for agriculture?
Yes, it's the largest ag trade show for technology in the world.
Okay, no, I haven't been to that show. I've been to others, but not that. In Thailand, in Asia, I have been to some of these trade shows where they showcase new equipment and technologies, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, please.
What's one piece of advice that you give to your freshman self?
What piece of advice would I give to freshmen?
To your freshman self, like back when you were younger.
Back in my younger days, just go out of your comfort zone. I came all the way from Malaysia to Iowa State. I've never been outside of Malaysia before, right? Until I was ready to come to university. So that was a huge challenge, right? To leave home, leave the nest. And as Roger said, my dad passed away 2 days before I left. So my mom not only lost her husband, but also lost me on a temporary basis, right? So I was the youngest of 9 in my family. So you can imagine how devastating, shocking it was to her, right? To have her husband gone and the youngest child leave the nest. So I learned so much by coming over to Iowa State. And that's why I'm here to give back, right? I'm a ISU Foundation governor, so I'm here this week to attend governors meetings. So in other words, I have made donations and I work with CALS in the leadership and innovation ag innovation. So that's where my funding has gone, right? So I will contribute more. I want to give back because of all the good stuff that I got out of ISU, right? Not only the education, but also the internships, the ability to work off campus. Foreign students, those days were not allowed to work off campus, but because I signed up for IPM, and IPM required 6 months of internships, so that was my excuse to work off campus. So I was so glad that I was able to work for a chemical company based in New Jersey, American Cyanamid, which today has been absorbed by BASF of Germany. So I was out there, as I said, in Tifton, Georgia, and York, Nebraska. I learned so much, just so incredible, right? Things that you can never just get out of classrooms, right? And today we talk about micro-credentials. How many of you here have heard of micro-credentials, right? These are very short courses that you can take, and we are working on that now, along with Dr. Bain and her team, to develop some of these micro-credentials, like soft skills, right? Like lots of subjects, right? People don't have long attention span these days. So it will be just for a few weeks, you earn a badge, you can put it on LinkedIn, you can put it on your resume, for being more marketable to employers, right, going forward. So my 6 months of internship is a form of micro-credentials, right? I learned so much, right? We didn't call that micro-credentials, but essentially they are. So we are developing those and will be implemented soon, right? Any other questions? Yes.
How possible do you think it is for society to step up and work together, considering each of us has their own personal interests?
Very good question. How possible it is for all the, I guess you can call them stakeholders, right, in the food supply chain to work together, government, right, packing houses, farmers, consumers, right, and the grain traders. They all have self-interest, right? The reason why we have what we have today in terms of food shortages, prices fluctuating, some years way up there, some years farmers not making money, certain situations, certain geographies not doing well. It's because of creation from humans, right? Politicians, right? So, we all have to work together, and that's why we have this World Agriculture Forum. Hopefully, we are able to come up with good ideas for submission to various government bodies to drive agricultural policies, right, for the benefit of everyone in the food chain, right? But it's very difficult. The reason why, as I said, we have the problems that we have is because all these stakeholders are not aligned, in terms of their interest, right? So whilst we say we want to mitigate climate change, on the other hand, all right, in Denmark, I said government is buying up dairy farms to shut them down, to cut down on methane emissions. Then on the other side, in Australia, farmers are now tearing up jungle for pastures to grow more cattle. Isn't that crazy? And their excuse is, well, we're not cutting down virgin jungle, we're cutting down regrowth, right? So here we're trying to mitigate, and there they're producing more animals, more meat, and more dairy products. So you can see, even in the same industry, people are not aligned, right? So on one hand, as I said, you want to mitigate climate change, you want to reduce methane emission. On the other hand, these guys are producing more and generating more methane, right? Fortunately, we have technologies now to, as I mentioned, cut down on methane emissions from animals, right? So that's very revolutionary technology. For years and years, there weren't such practices and technologies, but now we have it. So hopefully that can help to mitigate some of these methane emissions from animals. Next.
So if we can produce food
Okay, I don't believe that there are something like 700, 800 million people around the world who are facing hunger. They may be facing malnourishment, but not hunger. Okay, malnourishment can mean not a balanced diet. They just keep eating sweet potato or tapioca or whatever, right? They're not getting a balanced diet. They don't have enough proteins and whatnot. Now that I believe, but hunger, forget it. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I would get letters from organizations asking for donations to feed the hungry Africans, right? They will have pictures of skin and bones. I've been to Africa, I've been to Ghana, I've been to many parts. I don't see any of that, right? So if there are any of those people around, there will be people who are nomadic. They refuse to leave the Sahara Desert. Remember, I said sub-Sahara means below the Sahara Desert, which is in the northern part of Africa. There are people living in that part of the world, but they refuse to move because for generations they are there. So those people may actually have hunger problems, but it's a very small number, right? So if there are those 700 or 800 million people around the world facing malnourishment, it is not because of hunger, it's because they haven't got enough meat or whatever to have a balanced diet. And why is it that they don't have enough? It's because they don't generate enough income, right, to buy those food in, right? They may not be able to have, cows and pigs and chicken and all that. But like I said, it's because they haven't earned enough money, right? So, yeah.
And that is not a food security problem, like not a well nutrition, it's not a food security issue.
You're asking me whether that situation I described is not a food security issue. It is only a food security issue created by those people themselves, right? Like I said, they haven't earned enough money, right, to buy food. There's plenty of food. Like, as I always say, if you have money to buy food, food will show up, right? People have a lot of food to sell to you, but you don't have the money to buy. So there are also still some poor countries where there's still some donation of food. You know, remember I said India back in the 50s, 60s, ship to mouth, right? Food came by ship, not from the farms, right? And goes into the mouth. There's still a little bit of that, but very, very little around the world, right? So the key thing is education, right? You need to have the local population have a good income, and that's why I mentioned about second harvest, right? So there are also a lot of agricultural waste that can be turned into useful products. So why not teach them how to do that? By the way, when I was in Mumbai in the inaugural World Agriculture Forum, that evening in the auditorium, about twice as big as this, packed, we gave an award, the second World Agriculture Prize to an Indian chief minister. Why did he deserve to win this prize? Because he championed within his state that rural areas to boost income should grow bamboo, right? And they made beautiful bamboo products out of all this, right? Bamboo is a crop that's easily grown and very resilient, very low inputs required, and therefore the poor in those villages now had a source of income, right? And therefore they are able to buy food, right? Which they don't grow, don't have the ability to grow or whatever reason, right? So when you have income, food will come to you, right? So I don't believe there's major food security issues, right? If they are, it's because of their own doing, right? Not having our government not helping, not coming up with policies that will boost those marginal areas, population's income. Right?
So we'll end the formal part, but I encourage anyone to please come down, continue the conversation. a huge fan of LinkedIn, and he's very responsive to emails. So if you'd like to keep engaging with CS via email, he'd be happy to do that. But I encourage you to come down and take a sandwich on your way out. Please join me